It is that point in the show when we get some insights on the Bears from our Bear Blitz analyst, Hub Arkush. He joins us now from the Chicago area. And Hub, for the second straight week, this coming week, the Bears are going to be playing on a Thursday, this time against the Cowboys. The Cowboys have had a difficult time after a 3-0 start. Why aren't they running away with the NFC East? What is holding the Cowboys back?
Well, Scott, honestly, I think the biggest problem is they're not that great a football team. I think they're very overrated, really on both sides of the ball. The offense has piled up some great stats. They put up some big numbers. But when you dig into the schedule a little bit, they've done a lot of that against some of the weaker teams on the schedule. When they've run into the better teams, they've not only struggled to score points, they've struggled to win football games. Defensively, DeMarcus Lawrence is one of the better pass rushers in the NFL. They've got two great young linebackers in Jalen Smith and Leighton Vander Esch, although Vander Esch is now out with that neck injury. Other than that, though, they don't have a lot on the defensive line, and the secondary can be a little shaky. So they're a good football team. Don't misunderstand. The offensive line is outstanding, and when they commit to running the ball and grinding you down and eating clock and possessing the football, they can be very difficult to handle. But at the end of the day, they're just not in the same tier with the top 5, 6, 7 teams in the league.
Dak Prescott has been leading the NFL in passing yardage in recent weeks. What category do you put him in as the starting quarterback?
He's very good. Whether he is going to be a franchise quarterback, be one of the great ones, I think the jury is still out a little bit on that. Certainly the Amari Cooper trade last year helped give him at least one big-time receiver. Unfortunately, in all of his time at Dallas, he's never really had more than one big-time receiver. I think they tend to get a little out of whack sometimes trying to figure out when to let Zeke Elliott take over a football game and when they're not giving him the ball enough. Prescott is not the athlete or the runner that some of the other young guns are. People make that mistake, just assume that he may be. I mean, he's not immobile, but he's certainly not in the same class as a Lamar Jackson, really, or even a Deshaun Watson. Patrick Mahomes really isn't either, so sometimes we get a little confusion with that. But Prescott he's a really solid NFL starting quarterback who's had some very good moments, but he's also had some bad games. And so he's a guy that we've got to wait and see if they get him more weapons down the road, if he can be one of the big-time quarterbacks.
Could this be the end of the line for Jason Garrett as the head coach in Dallas if the Cowboys don't have a very strong finish?
Well, I know early last week after the loss in New England, Jerry Jones said some things that suggested he was more frustrated and more concerned than usual. Talked about his coach getting out-coached, but then pointed out everybody gets out-coached by Bill Belichick. And, of course, they were in New England last Sunday. But as I just kind of described, they don't really have the talent to be a Super Bowl champion, to be a Super Bowl team. So how objective he's being, how much of a chance he's giving Garrett is hard to see. I know earlier in the year he handed off the play calling to Kellen Moore, and it went very well, and people got very excited, but then they ran into some good defenses, and suddenly they weren't putting up points in bunches anymore. So I would say that Garrett, there is some pressure. I don't think he's on top of the coaching bubble, but I do think there's some pressure, and a lot is going to depend on how these last 4 games go.
Let's talk about a couple Bears. I'm curious what you think of the job Clinton-Dix has done this season, and would you like to see him back with the Bears next year?
Boy, it's funny you asked that question, Scott, because I was talking to a number of analysts about this earlier in the week, and they all agreed with me. I think Clinton-Dix has had a really good year, and it's going by very unnoticed and somewhat quiet. He has not been the best safety in the league. He hasn't flashed as a superstar, but he's making a lot of plays. He's playing very physical, which was the rap on him, is that he didn't like to get physical. He has been around the football. He's been good in coverage. And I think certainly, most teams in the NFL would love to have him. The problem that the Bears have is that Eddie Jackson and Clinton-Dix, size-wise and stylistically, are almost identically the same players. And so it leaves them without a strong safety, without a guy that you really want to play in the box when you're trying to take away the run. So I think what the Bears have to figure out is, are they comfortable playing with 2 free safeties, or are they going to have to get a more traditional strong safety or in the box safety to replace one of them? And if they do, I suspect it would be the decision to let Clinton-Dix move on. But he has certainly played well enough to give them a lot to think about and make them want to bring him back.
The other Bear I want to get your thoughts on is David Montgomery. As bad as the run game and the run blocking have been, can you even begin to evaluate David Montgomery and how productive of an NFL running back he could eventually be?
I don't think you can evaluate him yet, Scott. And I don't know how much of our audience, I'm guessing you probably take a look at the All-22 and the coaches tape sometimes. I spend a lot of time with it. And when you really go back and study, there's not a lot of holes that he's missing. There's not a lot of creases out there. They're just, whether it's the offensive line not blocking it well enough, whether Matt Nagy's scheme is just not ready for the NFL right now, whether the play calling is correct, or some of all of the above, whatever it may be. The running game is completely out of sync, and it's really not on David Montgomery. Now, there are a few occasions where he might not see a crease, might make the wrong decision. You can't fault the kid for effort. He hasn't been the factor in the passing game that I expected him to be, but I really don't think too much of it's on him. I mean, there's been a couple occasions where we see the ball in his hands and he does some really exciting things. So I think they got to stay with it, and I think they got to focus on probably the scheme more than anything else. Does what they're trying to do with the running game make sense? And once they commit to it and start to have a little bit of success, then we'll have a better idea of how much success he can have if they've got an effective run game to go to.
All right, Hub, thank you, and we'll talk again next week.
All right, Scott.
Okay, folks, catch Hub right here every week. Hub is, of course, the executive editor of Pro Football Weekly and ProFootballWeekly.com. Go there, you can find all sorts of information about the Bears and the NFL. You can also hear Hub on the Bears pregame and postgame shows on Sports Radio 670, The Score in Chicago.